Hi, this is Mary at Insect Shield, and I am so excited to be here today with Dr. Tim Lepore. He is the chief surgeon, your chief of surgery at the Nantucket Cottage Hospital. Thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I'm going to do a quick introduction, and then feel free to add anything, because I've been learning about you and reading about you, and what you do is very inspirational, and I was thinking like you're a Renaissance man, so it's really cool. Everything. So besides being a surgeon, you're also the high school physician, addiction specialist, an occasional veterinarian. You've done a lot of obstetrician work, a lot of births and birthing, tick disease expert, which is what we're going to concentrate on today. There's a book that's been written about you, Island Practice by Pam Bellick, which I highly, highly recommend. Marathon runner, avid hunter. You do it all.
Yes, I stay pretty busy.
Yeah, I love it. That's fantastic. So obviously, you have expertise in many fields, but we want to talk about ticks because you have been working with ticks probably some of the longest in the country in a place where ticks and tick-borne disease have been a real problem.
Yes, I mean, we probably have the highest incidence of Lyme disease in the country. It's slanted a little because it's on a population base of 10,000 according to the government. But our 4th of July, we have 60,000 people here who are out being tick attractants.
So when you arrived in Nantucket in 1983, and I know just to backtrack for folks, in 1975 is when Lyme disease was first originally diagnosed in Connecticut, to my understanding.
Yes, but in terms of tick diseases, in 1969, Andy Spielman came out to Nantucket from the Harvard School of Public Health because there was a case of a woman who had no travel history, who came down with what looked like malaria. Now, it turned out it was Babesia. And so Andy came out here and with some of his students from Harvard School of Public Health, and they were able to put together this tick disease that hadn't been seen before. I mean, there were a few cases in Europe in shepherds and things like that, and they all died, but this was a malaria-like illness. He was able to identify the deer ticks, which had not been out here, and make the connection that they needed the mouse, and the mouse were the reservoir for Babesia, and the deer were needed for a final blood meal. Then in the mid-70s, Alan Steer described what turned out to be Lyme disease in Connecticut. I mean, he was a rheumatology fellow, and he was attracted to this area where during the summer, the kids would come down with these rashes, and a lot of them seemed to get better with an antibiotic, but he got interested. And then in, I think it was 1980, the spirochete was identified by Willie Bugdorfy on a tick from Long Island. So then in the mid-90s, Sam Telford and myself described anaplasma out here, another tick-borne disease. So I've been here for most of the history of the tick diseases. I worked with, now I got involved because Andy Spielman wanted me to get patients who had a tick-borne disease to talk to his students. And then I met all these guys that were going into tick research, and that's where it started.
So, I mean, were people coming? You knew about tick-borne disease, early 80s, you're there. Are people coming in with these kind of strange symptoms? I mean, and we know not everyone gets a bullseye rash. You learned on the job, what to look for these different between Lyme and anaplasmosis, like what's happening with folks? Because it's got to be tricky to diagnose, because a lot of times people are like, oh, I never had a tick on me at all.
Well, I mean, it's the tick you don't see that gets you. I mean, people can
exactly
find a
right.
tick
Yes.
in the front, but they're
Right.
not quite as good looking behind on their back and other parts. So I always say, if you want to say you haven't had a tick in you, make sure you have a significant other or a good friend to look in the parts that you can't see.
Right.
But I got interested because I would see people, for example, with Babesia, that would come in with bed shaking chills, night sweats, and temperatures of 104. I mean, they were sick. And then you had Lyme disease, which is frustrating in that you may not have particular symptoms. I've had people with one rash, most commonly, but I've had people with 40 rashes because the spirochete became bloodborne and went in multiple places. I've had people show up with a facial palsy. I've had people show up. I mean, the archetype is the 10-year-old that comes in with a swollen knee in December because they got bitten in
Right.
June or July. And anaplasma along the way can present very much like Babesia. They tend to be sicker than the people with Lyme disease, but it's just interesting. I mean, I remember a 21-year-old girl that came in with heart block with Lyme disease. I mean, we see a 21-year-old with a heart rate of 30.
Wow.
It gets very interesting.
And I mean, I think the thing too, I'm not in Nantucket. So do you see? I mean, the three, so anaplasmosis, Babesia, and Lyme. Like you're seeing a lot, because I mean, those two. I mean, I talk to a lot of different tick folks, but those two are mentioned, but often like kind of, oh, they exist also, or is it kind of, how does
Depends
that
if you
work?
have it. It gets very interesting.
Right.
I mean, if you look like you've been hit by a truck, it catches your attention. Lyme
Right.
disease, because it can be tricky to diagnose. I mean, if somebody comes in with a bullseye rash, I mean, you can see that across the
Right.
room. But if they show up with a swollen knee in December, I mean, the ticks aren't really doing much. And you
Right.
got a lot of clothes on. I mean, you have to think of other things, you know. You think of Lyme disease, but you have to be aware of it. The same thing with a facial palsy. I mean, I've had people, I had the son of a plastic surgeon come in with a facial palsy, and his father was quite sure it was Bell's palsy. And I said, no, out on Nantucket, it's more likely to be Lyme disease, and I was right.
Right.
It's always interesting. There are various presentations, and it depends what part of the country you're from. I mean, when we affiliated with Mass General, the mothership, they had our technicians go up to learn how to stain for Babesia. And so Mass General, the tech, said, well, how many cases do you have? And I've had 50 cases in a year, whereas Mass General had about 5 cases. So it gets interesting. It's a very different situation out here because people are in close proximity to deer, to ticks, to mice, and so the circle of life goes on.
Right.
We have maybe the state deer biologist thinks we have 10,000 deer. And as a matter of fact, at 1:30 this afternoon, they are having a meeting up at the Fish and Wildlife to see whether we should have another hunt to cut down the deer population. Because
Right.
deer
Because
are
I was,
integral.
yeah. Yeah, no, sorry, because I know that you even back in 2004, so was the first, you advocated and rallied to have some extra hunts and really have been promoting that, and it with limited some success and some not a success. Like, so how did, tell us that's how that came about. Like, let's really go after the deer.
The deer are integral. If the deer were wiped out, these tick diseases would really go down to a very low level. At that time, I thought there were 50 deer per square mile.
Okay.
And so I said, why don't we try and get an extra hunt?
Wait, let me ask. So if there were 50 per square mile, how many? And right now you said there's 10,000 deer.
That is what the deer biologist says.
And how many square miles do you have?
50.
Okay. Wow. So the increase that's huge.
It is an enormous number of deer. So I said, let's have an extra deer hunt. It was the only place in the continental United States in February that you could hunt deer. The state gave out 900 permits, and we had 3 feet of snow the week before. So people came out here from Michigan in the big woods. They came out from Texas, where they hunt very differently.
Right.
And all of a sudden, they're hunting on an island that can be very congested. I mean, it is hard to get to a place on the island where you can't see a house. So that gets interesting.
Right.
So
Yeah.
the deer hunt was successful. We got 250 deer. And when I brought it up the next year, the selectmen, who I refer to as invertebrates, because they lacked the backbone to repeat it, refused to have another deer hunt. Deer were wiped out on Nantucket about 1000 AD. In 1922, there was a deer swimming in the Sound because they could swim. And that was Old Buck, so they brought him ashore. And after a year or two, they felt bad because Old Buck didn't have any friends. So they introduced, this is all true, they introduced 8 does from Michigan. And it got out of hand from there. At that time, Nantucket was looked like a golf course because there were 20,000 sheep here for 100 years. After a time, the brush grew up. Everybody wanted to be able to get a piece of and get some privacy and let the brush grow up.
Right.
So it becomes impenetrable in places. In 1935, they had the first deer hunt, and a fellow was shot and killed on the first day. So the residents got together, called Governor Curley, who called off the hunt at that point.
Gotcha.
Now, the deer park, at that time, it was more like a golf course.
Right.
And so it was a giant deer park. And people had very different opinions on the utility of a hunt. At this point in time, the brush has grown up. The deer have a great place to live. The mice have a great place to live. And the ticks, which require humidity and shade, have a great place to live.
Right.
You won't find a tick on a golf course in the fairway. But if you get into the rough, that's where the ticks are, where it's shaded and moist, because they desiccate very easily in the grass. So you're not going to get a tick on you from the grass, but if you let the brush grow up to your house and you let your kids out, they're going to come home with ticks.
Right. And then the deer, deer are, I'm sure they're everywhere, probably walking down all the streets. And I live in a suburban neighborhood in North Carolina, and we've got deer all over the place.
Yes. It is becoming a real problem. Whether the state approves an extra hunt remains to be seen, because we take between, let's say there are 800 deer taken legally between archery, shotgun, and muzzle loading. Now, how many are hit by cars?
Right.
I wouldn't even project. And if somebody's silly enough to be poaching, uh, you know, that's maybe there's 1,000 deer taken out. That doesn't put a dent
Right.
in the size of the herd. So they may have an extra hunt, but I will tell you, even people that have had a tick-borne disease uh, think that Bambi was a documentary.
Yes.
You know,
I know.
that's the problem.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, it is. Because I now look at deer differently with everything I've learned about ticks. And I am with people and they're like, look at that cute deer. I'm like, no, it's not. It's not like some cute little deer. No, that's not how it works here.
but it's interesting that people that have had a significant tick disease can't quite get their mind around it that reducing the number of deer, if you get down to 15 deer per square mile, which would be ideal, these tick diseases would really decrease in numbers, okay? Because there aren't that many ticks. However, the population is, as I said, very ambivalent about it. And I've had interesting discussions at town meeting about it. Um,
So if
besides
you
calling
can't,
the
yeah.
selectmen invertebrates.
Right. Right. So if you can't, if that is that one outlet option is not, you know, going as well as one would hope. What else? So I know that there's so you mean are you just educating everyone that comes in, like, you know, use repellents, check yourself, tuck your pants in, kind of
I
has
have
that messaging
yeah.
getting across?
No, I've spoken in a number of forums, and I say the basic thing is tick checks.
Right.
Okay. Human nature being what it is, people are lazy,
Yeah.
and they don't do tick checks. Like I said, you need a good friend, a spouse, to look at the parts where the sun doesn't shine. Because you may pick a tick off your thigh, but you're missing the one on your back.
Right.
And, you know, it's wonderful to take young children and give them a bath every night and take a look. But when they get to be 14, really isn't an option.
Right.
So that's my basic thing. Do tick checks. Do people do it? No, because people are inherently lazy. The second thing is using protective gear. You know, you use permethrin impregnated clothes, insect shield stuff, and avoid ticky areas. As I said, the ticks are not omnipresent. They're in the shaded, humid areas. If you cut back your brush, you reduce your risk.
Right.
If you don't make it attractive to deer by planting succulents and other things that they like, you'll have fewer deer on your property, fewer ticks. But unfortunately, people, that's too easy. People like to plant what they like to plant. Um, and then reducing the deer population. But
Right.
that's a non-starter. So what we're left with are tick checks, preventive clothing, avoiding ticky areas. I mean, you can pick out the ticky areas. They're right outside my office
Right.
because the hospital doesn't cut the brush back. The ticks are there, the deer are there, and it's an attractive nuisance.
Do you find that now, though, with more talk about ticks and tick-borne disease just in the news, are more people coming into the hospital or coming in like, I think there was a tick on me, I'm worried about the tick? Is that like good or bad? Are you spending a lot of time like helping people check their ticks? Like, has that changed?
I think if people arrive at the Nantucket airport, once they drive off the asphalt, they're quite sure that they have a tick-borne disease. So you have to sit down, take a history. Have they been in the brush? Do they have a cat that goes outside? Because cats are better groomers than dogs. A tick will get on a dog, get a blood meal, fall off in the house and die because the humidity is too low. A cat, on the other hand, because they are better groomers, they curl up next to you and flick off a partially fed tick, which then gives you a
I
tick-borne
haven't heard
disease.
that one.
I try and emphasize these things. I don't think cats should go outside. And if you have a dog, probably there is a finite risk, but dogs aren't good groomers. These
Right.
are all things you can look at and do. Wear light colored clothes. Tuck your pants into your socks. Now, I tell people, you may look a little dorky, but you know what? You won't be coming to see Lepore for antibiotics.
Right.
But it's too easy. Putting your clothes in the dryer for a period of time can help get rid of the ticks that are on your clothes. I mean, these are all things you can do, but they're too easy to do.
Right.
People at the peak tick season, people are on vacation.
Right.
They mistake the island for Disney World, except it's Disney World with ticks.
Yes. And yeah, I mean, and I also wonder, are you getting now, I mean, has like alpha gal, are you getting the Lone Star tick
Yes,
now?
we are seeing that. Lone Stars are a recent addition.
Now, let me ask, I mean, like, is that coming? Because obviously you're an island. So are people bringing, did the Lone Star tick get on something and then come over? Like, how did the tick get introduced?
The Lone Star ticks came up from Narragansett Bay, Prudence Island. They were very prominent there. Then they were over in Tuckanuck, which is an island probably at best a half a mile away. Tuckanuck is infested, but it's only in the last year or two that we've seen Lone Star ticks. Now, Lone Stars bring a whole other series of problems. I mean, the one I'm seeing more of this year, I had 10 cases of tularemia.
Oh, I'm not familiar with tularemia. What's
Tularemia is also called rabbit fever.
okay?
There was no tularemia in New England until the 20s when the hunters had run out of cottontail rabbits to hunt. So they imported 65,000 black-eared jackrabbits from Kansas, a certain percentage of whom were carrying tularemia or tularemia-infected ticks. So 1935 was the first case over on the Cape. And I had to hunt for 10 years to find about 8 cases. And then all of a sudden this year, I had 10 cases. I mean, I had a couple of kids playing with a dead rabbit. Okay, that explains that. But I also had a 90-year-old out in her garden, and I don't think she was getting wild and crazy and playing with rabbits. And she came down with pneumonic tularemia. You have to be aware of it. I mean, I had a young woman come in with a rash that somebody in the emergency room told her was Lyme disease. I looked at it. It wasn't Lyme disease, it was tularemia. But there are all these other diseases that are coming in. Ehrlichia, tularemia, and a couple of others that are coming in with the Lone Stars. We don't have a large number of Lone Stars, but I've seen, well, actually, one of my receptionists has alpha gal and the meat allergy.
Right.
So we're going to see more of that. But again, you have to think about it. You can sit down and treat somebody for particularly the GI symptoms, and not think about alpha gal and that they've been bitten by a Lone Star tick. So we're going to see more of that as the Lone Stars come.
Yeah, no, that's alpha gals really seems to be the Lone Star tick is making it's a lot of headlines these days. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's I think talking to someone like you, so much expertise with ticks, and it all comes down to education, doing the tick checks, doing some protection. So, I mean, our goal is the more different people we have, experts like you, just saying this is what you have to do, and it's not that hard, and you can really protect yourself.
No, you can.
You know, and pretty easily. The other, so I know, so obviously there's ticks, but I believe you've also done work on mosquitoes. So that is another. And
Well,
I was, or you used to, what did you were like, always, you were finding mosquitoes or researching
I'm always looking for things. I was
Okay.
trapping mosquitoes, looking for Eastern equine encephalitis. We didn't find it.
There was a lot of that, but this year that became a topic in the news, the EEE, yes, in
And
Massachusetts.
we've had one case
Okay.
a long time ago, but I'm out there looking. I was looking. My first case of tularemia was a guy that lived on a boat, worked on the boat, and he probably got bitten by a greenhead fly because he had a big ulcer on his back. He was a fair-skinned guy, blonde hair, and I was sure it was a malignancy, but then it dawned on me he had all of these lymph nodes. So I aspirated one of the lymph nodes and we found tularemia.
So how do you like? Is that like you take blood and then you actually like look at the blood and you see like what the tularemia?
Well, no, what I did was I sent it to my compatriot at Tufts Veterinary School, who has a very high end laboratory and can look at these things. That's because it is spread. They can be spread as an aerosol, tularemia. It is a level 1 bioweapon. And so probably what I did was something probably semi-illegal by sending the specimen over to him. But I was pretty sure that's what it was when I saw the notes, because this fellow came in late in the afternoon with this big ulcer on his back. I had to think about it, but it came to me that night. That's what it was. I aspirated a note and sent it off. It is, tick diseases are fascinating.
Yes. And that there's so many, and I think too, just there's so many different diseases, and also that the different ticks are carrying different germs. So I think one thing that we fight a lot, the misconception, like, oh, I was bitten by a tick, now I have Lyme disease immediately. Where maybe you have something, but it's not Lyme because you weren't bitten by the tick that could even give you a Lyme disease.
Yes, I mean, you always have to think. And the other kicker in this is we are a sole source aquifer. Okay, we're sitting on the water we're going to drink. We're not getting water from the mainland in a pipe. It is all water beneath the island. So if we go out spraying for ticks, at some point in time, we'll be drinking that.
Right.
And plus you kill, if you go out and you spray during the day, you kill all of the bees. So spraying, I just really disagree with. You could spray at night, but I think we have, in our approach to tick-borne diseases, we have to make sure we don't poison ourselves. I mean, permethrin is from chrysanthemums, but that doesn't mean I want to drink it.
Right, exactly. Now, and there's one, so I know, so there's, you have the hunt that, maybe you'll have another hunt. That's one, kind of way to, if you can cull the deer, educate the people. And then I saw, there was two other things I wanted to ask you about and get your kind of what happened with that. I know that some folks from MIT came out at some point and they were trying to inoculate the mice. And then there was kind of, it looked like it was going to happen and then it didn't happen. Then there's new talk of that. Is that something that you've been involved with?
Well, I think I was very involved with the tick vaccine, the Lyme vaccine back in the 90s.
Okay.
We immunized a couple of hundred people and it was very effective. However, the problem was that Lyme disease at that point in time was believed to be primarily in the New England coast, but now it's
Right.
spread. And so the lawyers got involved. uh, for the cost of dealing with the lawyers and et cetera, the vaccine went away. It was a very effective vaccine. It was a
Yeah.
safe vaccine. That went away. The mice versus ticks approach, immunizing the mice, is really a great idea. Now, it has been discussed several times, on Nantucket. The only people to really raise an objection were the anti-GMO people. So, because one of the ideas was to use the CRISPR gene to insert it into the genetic material of the mouse, so it would be passed on to all the other little mice. So people objected to that. So the plan was then to initially get Nantucket white-footed mice, immunize them, get 50,000 of them, release them in the spring on Nantucket because the mouse population is at its lowest at that point. And then over 10 years, because the immunized mice would mate with what I like to call the towny mice. And over
And
time,
eventually, right. Okay.
the effect of the immunized mice would go
Right.
out about 10 years.
Right. Right.
By that time, hopefully, the people, anti-GMO people, would be more accepting of producing a genetically modified mouse. Now, there are people that are concerned about birds of prey that feed on the mice because they think maybe something bad will happen. Well, people at MIT are being very careful. They come to town meetings and say, look, not often, but occasionally, these types of experiments have gone wrong. Now, that may mean you end up with a mouse the size of a Labrador,
Right.
or something like that. I mean, I think they're taking a very safe approach. If we can try the initial experiment with highly immune mice, you can probably get an old freighter and fill it up with mice and get 50,000 immune mice and see the effect. Using the CRISPR gene is a different process because theoretically there are ways to control the extent of its effects. You can confine it to an area. You can confine it to lasting so many reproductions. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do with the CRISPR gene. The work is going on right now. I think they have proven they can do it with lab mice. I think the white-footed mouse may be a little more difficult because they're probably not as closely related to the laboratory mice as had been hoped.
Right. Gotcha.
I think that
I mean, and
they're
yeah.
potentially a little closer related to hamsters, but
Gotcha.
I think that will keep them busy for a while.
Right. Well, and do you think that then, so, I mean, things like the hunt or this for Nantucket, because it's an island, does that make it like this could work? I mean, is something like calling a deer population on like, in a big, in kind of mainland, would that as much of an option, or is this kind of more for Nantucket because you do have the luxury of, water borders?
Well, I mean, I think it should be attempted first on a small area, like Nantucket or
Right.
Tuckernuck. Um, the deer hunt, realistically, I would say is probably going to be a non-starter.
Right.
Like I said, Bambi wasn't a documentary. So I'm hopeful that the mouse research
Right.
bears out. But we're talking, that's the long game because we're talking 10 or 15 years from
You got
now.
a lot. Yeah, you got a lot of generations of
Yeah,
mice
and you've
to.
got
Yeah.
a lot of people getting Lyme disease, Babesia, and
Right.
anaplasma,
Right. Right.
and tularemia.
Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, you're doing some great work there, and just it's great to like kind of hear you continue to work and hopefully can get the word out for people that they can protect themselves. And you got to know what you're looking for, and like you said, small things, cutting the brush back. I mean, there's just little things one can do to make themselves so much safer at home, and like it just and we even say like spraying your shoes with permethrin once a month. That alone can dramatically decrease your chance of a tick getting on you, and it's not that hard. It takes all of 30 seconds.
And I recommend the insect resistant clothes because it's
Yeah.
easy.
Yes.
And I mean, the military's been doing that for 50 years
Yeah.
or more. And so I think that that's another a way to do it.
Yeah.
And, you just have to be aware that if you go in ticky areas, you may get a tick on you. And
Have you found too? I mean, now with so many people on Nantucket having either tick-borne disease or someone like in their family or a close friend, has that changed people's behaviors at all when they see other people maybe going through this, or
it is
short term?
people want an easy answer. And until the island sinks in another 400 or 500 years, we're going to have a problem. And people may be, everybody's familiar with somebody that's had Lyme disease.
Right.
Or seen people that have had Lyme disease and Babesia and anaplasma. Everybody's seen them, but they still get it.
Right.
They still get it. And people play with dead rabbits. Why?
Yes.
I don't know. I can understand people have gotten tularemia trying to break up two dogs that are fighting over a dead rabbit, but I wouldn't recommend it.
Okay.
So
No dead
people
rabbit.
have short memories, and they want to go
Right.
out and they want to do what they want to do,
Right.
and all of a sudden they're surprised again. Oh, I guess I got Lyme disease, or I guess I got Babesia.
Well, I mean, they're lucky they're in Nantucket to have a doctor like you, though, that looks for the symptoms, that thinks about it, because what happens a lot of places where, someone goes, well, we don't have that here, that, we don't have tick-borne disease here. And and they don't even ask, oh, maybe you traveled to Nantucket. So I think that's also just like in the healthcare world that professionals are saying, wait, where have you been? What have you been doing? Could there potentially be a tick-borne disease that you're carrying?
People don't get travel histories, and then all of a
Right.
sudden, I get a call from France, or I get a call from the state of Washington or Wyoming, but because somebody asked, well, have you been on Nantucket or the Vineyard? And then all of a sudden it gets a little easier, but then I
Right.
get a call, how the hell do I treat this? And then I have to talk to them about that. I mean,
Right.
it's interesting being here and seeing these tick-borne diseases because I think they're fascinating, and I like to go and ferret things out. I work with Tufts Medical School, Tufts Veterinary School, with Mass General, and with Yale School of Public Health. We came up with the treatment for Babesia. Before it was quinine and clearacin people got so sick with that they decided that they'd let Babesia run its course. So we came up with a treatment with atovaquone and zithromax that is very tolerable. Although the atovaquone is a little bit like library paste in yellow, but people get better. I mean, we treat them for a week.
That's fantastic.
It's just interesting, and I like to stick my nose in things and see what's going on.
Well, it sounds like you've made a lot of great changes, and you've like saved many people's lives and given them new outlooks. Because some of the people that you've also treated that they like walked in thinking they were dying, and you were like probably one of the only ones that were able to diagnose them and say, okay, no, you're not dying. We're going to figure it out, and we're going to help you. So it's really cool.
Interesting. It's just interesting being here and having this patient population, and you get to ferret things out. If you don't think of it, you won't diagnose it.
Right. No, that's fantastic. Well, I know you have a meeting to get to in a little bit, so I don't want to keep too much longer, but thank you for just sharing your knowledge and your history with, tick-borne disease. You're probably in the U.S. one of the people working on it the longest, and it's really cool that we could talk to you about that and hear your stories. Oops.
I am one of many, but I happen to be in a hotbed of it.
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, there are people doing a lot of research, but a fellow that we developed the atovaquone zithromax protocol was writing a big article about Babesia. And he called me up. The article was in the New England Journal. He called me up and he said, Tim, what's the atovaquone look like? And I had to tell him it looks like yellow library paste and probably tastes just the same. So a lot of people I work with are in laboratories, but they haven't seen a deer or a mouse, except a white mouse in the lab. They don't see the white-footed mouse, deer mouse.
Well, and I hear, and you really see exactly how many ticks are on deer, because I understand you go, when people are coming in from the hunts with the deer, you go and like look at the deer and you scoop up the ticks off the deer's belly.
Yes.
So you really see how many ticks, so how many ticks are typically on a deer? No, I just changed.
The most I've taken off, and I just finally got tired, was 165 females off one big buck.
Wow.
And I've gone out. I go down to the deer checking station because the first week of shotgun, everybody has to bring the deer, their age, weight, and sex. So I go down there and pick ticks off the deer as they come by. I have to keep it moving, though, because they checked 160 deer the first day of shotgun this year.
And each female tick, if she, it's like 2,000 eggs?
2,000 eggs.
And you caught 165 just female ticks. So multiply that out if you're good at math.
That's off of one deer.
Right, one deer. All right, I just changed some. But I'm going to let you go. But I really thank you so much for your time. We might call on you again if we have love to just hear more of your tick stories and just, kind of the world of insects, and then how insects intersect with the humans and disease. And because we need insects, but we also don't want people getting sick.
Well, I haven't found a great usefulness of having all these ticks.
Well, I have to tell you, I asked a doctor that works at the SUNY, their College of Forestry, and I did ask him, do we need ticks? And he said, I don't think we do. Mosquitoes, there's some he's like, but ticks, we have not found a reason now. Maybe there was one at some point, but now that we could, they're not helping our, they're not part of that population of we need.
Or we don't understand their position. But
or maybe, exactly, maybe we don't understand.
Maybe
Even
we
if we
can
got rid of them
and still dislike them.
Right, exactly. So, well, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
Fun talking to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.